All right, guys, what's up? Andre with AndreReese.Biz. All right, guys, I'm going to talk about a couple things real quick today. I want to talk about the DC squatter that made national news, and I want to also talk about Coach Moore with Michigan. There's some lessons that can be learned personally and for business about talking about these two subjects. But before I get onto that, I'm actually over here. I think this is Durham lofts that they're actually working on. There used to be there was a nonprofit called Feed More, and what they're doing over here is they're leveling out the land. They're going to be building, I think, 180 condo townhouse homes. You know, so I was thinking they weren't going to get started on leveling the land and moving things around until, you know, next year. But they're out here banging and doing their thing. So, you know, and then down this way here as we move forward, we got the VCU athletic field. It's going to be 40 acres when it's all done, and they've gotten one major portion of it taken care of already. So, and I screwed around today and took forever to be able to get out here and get on my bike. And then when I was ready to go, I didn't have my camera charged up, so I had to go quick charge that real quick. So, but I finally made it, and it's not that bad today. It's roughly about 55 degrees or so out here. I think I got up to like 59 today. The weather is unusually warm for December. You know, we can say global cooling a little while ago, now global warming, and you know, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to use as far as a term, you can probably put that into effect. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into it right now, and you guys can see around me. I'm not going to do my typical ride. I'm just going to just bust this video out real quick before these topics become a little less relevant, and then we'll go from there. So, whew, almost hit something down there real quick. All right, so here we go. So I'll go ahead and talk about the DC. So it's the DC squatter. Man, this one sister, she got national attention for being in a unit and not. So the way it started out, she has a history of doing these types of things, and where she'll move into a unit and then she'll eventually claim, you know, tenants' rights, stop making payments, and then she will go ahead and tap out and say, I'm not making payments anymore, but at the same time, I'm not leaving either, you know, and that creates a nightmare issue when it comes to being real estate landowner, you know, or somebody that's renting out a property, Airbnb, whatever it might be, because, you know, you are relying upon the income to keep things, you know, going pretty smoothly, you know. So, and if you're not able to get that income coming in, it just gets to be to the point where it's all bad. So these guys over here laying down the concrete right now. You know, they are moving right along over here for sure. And so this is kind of what happened. So I think back in February or March of last year, or this year actually, 2025, and this happens quite a bit. She came through the Airbnb app, and I think she rented the place for 30 days, 32 days, whatever the limitation is. And hang on, there's a little bit of noise here. I think they're compacting the ground. So she ended up renting the unit that she got on Airbnb in Washington, D.C. for that amount of time. And then when time was up, she reached around to the owner of the property and said, hey, yo, I want to stay longer, but I'm more than willing to do that, but let's just do it outside of Airbnb. And when we do that, You know, you'll make more money in your pocket because you don't have to pay the commission to Airbnb, and I can get a little bit better deal, but I'm interested in staying here a lot longer than the 32 days that's already expired, or 30 days, whatever it might be. And so, of course, you know, the property owner ran the numbers and the figures and said, you know what, that works out great for me, let's go ahead and do it. So they may or may not had a contract, whatever it might have been. They had an agreement of what they were going to do, and they went ahead and did it. And so, of course, I don't think any income or money changed hands because the lady was already in the place. They had an agreement that I would go ahead and, that she would go ahead and bring the money by at a relatively soon date and do the exchange, and then everything would be all good. Wonderful. Yeah, this sounds just like the movie, you know, Pacific Heights. I don't know if you guys remember that from back in the 80s with Michael Keaton. But so she had possession of the property. She didn't make any payments at all. Then after a series of back and forth, you know, she finally told the lady, she said, hey, I'm not going to pay, and, you know, sue me, kind of a thing. And at that point, you know, the saga began. So I think she occupied the property a total of, if it was in March, so roughly about 10 months or so, she was in the property that she didn't pay rent. And she's fairly lucky because there's cases and scenarios where people have stayed in properties, you know, for several years, especially after the pandemic, and then didn't make a single payment at all, you know. And so I'm coming up now on the new ballpark over here. It is banging. They got the seats in now, and they are making some significant progress. I'll turn around here so you guys can kind of see me, see what's going on behind me. You guys can take a look. So she made, you know, a promise to pay the rent. She never did. And in the end, what ended up happening, you know, she ended up staying. So that's when the legal process began. You know, so the lady that owned the property, the landlord, she demanded to get paid. The lady didn't, ducked and dodged. They ended up going back and forth to court. And there was a point where she actually went and hung a sign up on the property and said that, you know, the lady was living there illegally. She had no right to be there at all. And then the lady that was supposed to be renting and paying, she went to court and tried to get an injunction to get the sign taken down because it was embarrassing. But I think the courts sided with her. So she ended up taking and covering up the billboard with a blanket that was, you know, posted to the house. And of course, the landlord continued on with the process of trying to get the property, the person that was occupying, to get them evicted and get them out of there so that they can get possession of their property back. So in the end, what happened? You know, as you would expect, you know, I remember at some point where I was watching, man, this ballpark is just fantastic. So I remember at one point when I was watching TV or watching YouTube, they had an interview with the DC squatters, what they came up with the name. And so she agreed to have an interview with a reporter, and the reporter, you know, was very kind and very sincere and was asking a bunch of questions and stuff. And the lady was like, yeah, well, you know, I was sick and there was another issue and I couldn't do it and blah, 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 blah. It was just a series of, you know, stacked excuses as to why she couldn't make the payment for the rent on the property itself. And then in the end, you know, the reporter was like, okay, cool, you know, I appreciate hearing your side of the story. And then the lady herself, she was kind of like, you know, wow, it was so nice to, you know, get my story out there and let you guys know that I'm not trying to do anything bad here. But if you listen to the story, the lady just was, you know, it was just excuse after excuse after excuse. And most likely what she was saying was not true in any kind of way, you know, allegedly, you know, so. And so I think the next couple days went by or so, and then the reporter did some more investigation, and she found out that she has a history of at least 2 or 3 other properties of doing the same thing. And she had actual outstanding judgments against her. I think one was for $30,000, the other one was for $50,000. Don't quote me on it, you know. And so she went back to talk to her and said, hey, how you doing? You know, I did some more information, I got some more information. And so she was more than happy, the DC squatter was more than happy to, you know, sit down and talk with her. She was like, hey, I went and, you know, looked up some information, and I found out that you have these other judgments that are against you also as well. What do you have to say about them? And at that moment, you know, the DC squatter was like, you know what? I'm not gonna talk to you anymore. I got nothing else to say. And then shortly after that is when she got evicted, and a number of the people in the community came there on eviction day, and they were helping the lady get her, remove the person that was unlawfully detaining her property, to move her stuff out of there. And they were carrying out piece by piece and stacking it on the driveway. And people were like, you know, they came against one of us and they come against all of us, and this is not fair. And we want our neighborhood back. We don't want this kind of craziness and this kind of foolishness out here. So we stand here and we stand united, which is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. You know, so I'm glad that the people got together and made it happen. And then they end up ultimately evicting the lady, and she wasn't there. And I tell you, for it being an Airbnb, she moved her whole life into this place. So she had everything that she owned, clothes and dishes and, you know, containers and TVs and all that stuff. They carried the stuff all out piece by piece, and they set it up and on the curb, and that's how she was ultimately evicted. Crazy, you know. And so in the end, you know, I don't know what this lady's going to do, the one that got evicted. She's going to have to, I'm quite sure she's very resourceful. She'll find another way to make it happen. I think the stuff that got set outside, I think she came later on that day or the next day and picked through the pile of rubble that was out there, and she turned around and, you know, took some stuff and left a lot of stuff behind. And so that's what typically happens when there is an aggressive eviction. You know, everything gets thrown out onto the streets, and very few times you're going to find that the person has a U-Haul to take all the stuff. Pretty much their life is left, and neighbors and people in the community will come and pick through. And when there's a forceful eviction, I think there's a certain statute, I'm not sure, it varies by state on what has to happen, but typically what I've seen that's happened is folks will come and pick through the items, you know, that are unrelated to the, you know, to the squabble, and they will take what they want to, and a lot of stuff ends up in the trash or the dumpster eventually. So, you know, my heart goes out to the DC, oh man, I forgot what she was. So my heart goes out to the DC squatter, and I hope she finds her way. I hope she finds peace and resolution in life, because I think she's somewhere in her 40s, and the lady's going through some stuff, you know, so nobody should be celebrating what happened. You know, these two people had their lives collide momentarily for a period of time, and the result is not, neither one of the parties in this situation came out winning, you know. So the lady that was actually been deemed the DC sniper, you know, or not the DC sniper, but the DC squatter, you know, her visual and personal reputation is ruined. And Airbnb turned around and removed her from the property. And the lady that is the landowner, the landlord, she's got to clean up the mess and try to financially recover from not receiving rent, fix all the damage, and hopefully get somebody into the property that it will is willing to make payments on it. So will that actually happen and go well? All we can do is hope that things work out for her, and you know, I hope that it does. And so all these things I talk about, they're not designed to, sometimes they're controversial, other times they're not, but more so than not, there is a little bit of controversy that's behind these things. And so the reason why I talk about them is because there's always a life lesson and a business lesson that can be learned from it. And ultimately, in the end, when things go bad, most of the things that happen are not anything new. A lot of times these things have happened before in some other version before in the past, and we forget about them. But this is a good chance for us to take, the lessons that have been learned from these people and try to apply them to your life as possible. That way you don't run up upon the same mistakes as she has. And I'll tell you, this is not unusual. It happens all the time. And there was another famous case that took place down in Southern California. It was a doctor or a dentist. He was renting an ADU, and he had built it on his property in the back. The lady came in from Airbnb, rented it for 30 days, and turned around and stopped paying. And then she ended up saying that there was all these problems with the place because he had built it illegally without permits. And in order to evict her, he had to make all the repairs she claimed, rights of a tenant because she had lived there for over 30 days. And then the same thing happened. He was on Airbnb with her, and then she turned around and said, hey, I can pay you a little bit less. You'll make a lot more. And, I need a long-term place to stay, and I'd be more than happy to stay here. And of course, the guy's like, I hate this whole Airbnb thing. I hate having to keep the place clean and pay all the fees and all the taxes. So I'm more than happy to take less in order for me to be able to make more in the long run and not have to deal with the hassle factor of having a rental property. And so he went ahead and did it. And I think it took well over a year. It might be a year and a half to 2 years, but let's just say probably a year and a half for him to get the lady finally evicted. And so she finally ended up leaving on her own, and he was left with a mess that he had to deal with. And so this is not anything new that's happened. So if this lady was aware of this case that had happened in Southern California, maybe she would have done differently. And I'll tell you, at one point, I had mentioned it earlier, there was a movie with Michael Keaton in the 90s called, what was it called? Pacific Heights. And so Michael Keaton was, at the time, he was like a rich, playboy, millionaire. And he was, essentially he was a scam artist is what he was. And so he presented very well. He had a Porsche, he had a pocket full of cash. And what he did was, there was a couple that had bought a home in Pacific Heights. They kind of stretched a little bit further than they were probably capable of living on their own. And then they decided to rent out the basement to somebody to help subsidize the mortgage. And it was a great idea. So they spent a lot of time working together, painting, having fun, giggling, painting each other's noses, all that kind of stuff. And then they finally put the place up for sale. Michael Keaton came by, parked his Porsche. He had credentials, he had money, and he said, hey, I love the place. I want to move in, and what I want to do is I want to pay you, it was either 6 months or a year cash in advance. I want to just go ahead and pay for the mortgage or pay for my staying here. And of course, they were so excited to get this money. They just had a baby and all that, and they were a young couple. And so he reached into his pocket, he pulled out a whole bunch of money, he started counting, he's like, oh shoot, it was all hundreds, their eyes were getting big. He's like, oh man, I don't have enough. It's Friday, the bank, at the time, banks really weren't open on Saturdays. He's like, I can go to the bank on Monday and get the money and bring it to you guys and pay it all. And they were like, yeah, sure. He's like, well, can I go ahead and move in the meantime? And we'll just square up on Monday. And with a little bit of hesitation, they said, okay, all right. So of course, Michael Keaton moved into the place, and Saturday, Sunday came, and went, and then Monday came and went, and no money. Michael Keaton didn't bring anything in to give anybody, and so The couple was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, oh man, I had a check that didn't clear, kind of excuses, and just give me another day or two. So day or two turns into a week or two or three, and it becomes apparent that he's not going to leave. And so they want him out of the place, but because he's already moved in, and tenant right laws in California, he was allowed to stay. And so what did he start doing? He started destroying the place. He was taking and breaking the sheetrock and hammering and jackhammering. He had a friend that was there also too that was helping him. So they have a history of going to these houses and destroying them. And what ends up happening is the owner of the property gets angry and mad and goes down and confronts them. They get into a fight, and then the person that's the landlord strikes him, and because they're frustrated, and guess what? They now have a liability, and they end up losing the house in court. And so Michael Keaton essentially goes around and does this. He hijacks homes, gets into a confrontation, gets struck, and then he turns around and sues the person, and he takes the property and it belongs to him. So I think there was a fight. I don't remember the full details of it, but ultimately in the end, I think Michael Keaton ended up dying in this movie when he fell. Don't quote me, it's been a while since I've seen this, but and it was decided, it was like one of those, and this was like a series of movies that were coming out in the 90s, like Fatal Attraction and this type of stuff. So it was all hyped up on that type of energy and that type of adrenaline, And so it got to the point where Michael Keaton, in the end, didn't get the property. The couple ended up gaining back the rights to the property. And I think in the end, they ended up putting a for sale sign in the ground to sell the property and move on, So, but like I said, these things are not anything new that happens with rental properties, and so what's the lesson? The lesson is, if you got to realize that and I've got a ton of clients over the years that rent properties out. I would say a small percentage of them, less than 15%, 20% probably have great success. They have a great tenant that moves in, they make the payments, they live there a long time. If the person moves out, they're able to get somebody else to come in and move in. There's minimal issues and damage. But I got a ton of clients that over the years, let me turn my backlight on real quick. I've got a ton of clients over the years that have bought properties and rented them out and had the tenant not pay rent and tear the places up, whether they rented Section 8 or whether they rented to just a straight up tenant. I've had a number of clients that have had tons of disasters with these type of things. And, I can understand the frustration that somebody has when they rent a property. Because the thing is, once you buy a rental property, the way that it's sold is you rent the property, it's a vending machine, you get money out of it every month, everything works out great. You get to increase the rent every year, 3 or 5%, and everything is wonderful, but it rarely works that way. A lot of it's going to depend upon the location, a lot of it's going to depend upon your tenant, their income, their background, what their needs and their wants are, and so the lesson that you can learn from this is, if you want to approach the problem of getting a rental property, great. Just be absolutely careful. And you want to try to limit the amount of risk as much as possible, because the bank requires a lot of money to put down on a rental, usually 30%, more than a home, because there's a lot more risk. You're going to have a much higher interest rate, but you're really relying upon the renter to make the mortgage payment. And if something happens with the property where there's a flood or there's some damage or there's some issue or the tenant decides that they don't want to pay, you got to come out of pocket to shore all that stuff up. And if you can't do that, eventually you're going to lose the property, you're going to wreck your credit, and there's not anything you can do about it but lick your wounds and try to see what went wrong and if there's a better way that you could have done it. That's just what it comes down to. So ultimately, in the end, if you want to do a rental property, just be careful. And I think the safest way that you can go about it, if you decide to do Airbnb, stick with Airbnb and let Airbnb manage the property and make sure that the tenant doesn't take over and get rights to it. And if you're going to end up renting a property out on your own, go out of your way to ensure that you are making sure that you are getting the best tenant that you can get, that they're financially stable, and stay on top of the problem. And if things change, they change, because in the end, the reward is you get somebody to pay off the house, over time. You get appreciation that's there. And if you decide you want to move into the house in your old years, when you're retiring, you can live there for 2 years and turn around and convert it into a primary residence, and then you're good to go. You can shelter $250,000 if you're single from taxes. You can shelter roughly $500,000 in taxes if you in capital gains if you are a married couple. So yeah, just be careful out here in these streets when it comes to rental property, and there's no shortcuts to being able to do it. The best way you can minimize your risk is to take it slow. And of course, you want to turn around, and if you can buy a property cash outright, then your risk is minimal. And really, at that point, the money that you have coming in is almost like having a vending machine, because you don't have to pay. You only have to pay for your basic maintenance and upkeep, and then you only have to deal with the property taxes and that type of stuff. So no recommendation here for what you should do. But those are some things you should definitely consider, and that kind of puts things in perspective of what happened here with the DC squatter. So like I said, my heart goes out to both parties involved. They both have been hurt and harmed. The landlord definitely, for the sister that was deemed the DC squatter, she definitely has a history of some challenges in her life, and this is kind of a culmination of where things are for her. So I hope that she gets the help that she needs going forward to be able to hopefully get out of the spiral, because it's not going to get any easier at this point. So that's it. That talks about the DC sniper. So let's talk about my man. Let's talk about Coach Moore with Michigan. Man, so this one's a crazy one. So I'm not going to go into the details. You guys already know about them, or you can simply Google them if you want to. But if you guys are familiar with college football, it is the farm for the NFL. And Michigan is a well-respected, top-tier program. And it probably places in the top 10 of football programs, and it's got a good track record, a good history. Their players go to the NFL. Their coaches also graduate to the NFL. So if you can get one of those coveted spots working for the Michigan program, you are probably going to be set for life when it comes to football, American football in the U.S. So Coach Moore, he recently got into this position. I think he had a total of a $30 million contract for 5 years or 6 years. It was like $5 or $6 million a year was what he's supposed to get. And he's married with 3 kids. He has a wife, and they've been married now, like I said, for 10 years. And he got caught up in the game, and he ended up dating one of the administrative assistants that worked for the program. Ended up having a situation where, she got pregnant, and in the end, that pregnancy was terminated, and she ended up going and talking to the school. His wife found out about it, and in the end, he ended up losing his job and his career. So that's the short part of this individual issue. So to kind of summarize it. And so, of course, man, there's a lot of things that you can say about this whole thing. But like I said, when it comes to these kind of things, this is nothing knew. And this can easily apply to women as it has, and it also applies to men also as well. So what is the advice here? What is the business sense? I'll tell you, when you watch the movie The Wire, you know, they always accuse the young yos not being able to count in school, but when it came down to the package, you know, they always knew how much they had in the stash box. They also knew how much they had in cash. And so they would ask them, like, how do you know, how much it is if you're not so good in school? I said, in school, you know, if you don't know what 2 + 2 is, nothing really happens to you. But out here on the streets, if you don't know what 2 + 2 is, you're done. And that might be the end of your life as you know it. So they're a lot more incentivized. So the thing about it, even in the streets on The Wire, they knew to protect the package. And so in this particular case here with the coach, his position that he had with the school was the package. And he got sloppy with it. And, you know, in the end, he didn't put the package first. And he ended up getting, you know, taken down by his needs and his wants. You know, so what is the simple answer here? And what is the simple breakdown that we should all be aware of? And I don't care if you, like I said, if you're male or female, you should not date people at work, you know, period. And if you have a lot on the line and there's a gap in the reporting responsibility, it's even more of a reason not to date anybody at work. You know, there's, how many people are on this planet? 6 to 8 million people. There are other people that you can find out here on Earth to try to build a relationship with. And you have to be able to be professional and understand that if you decide to cross that line at work, you know, everything that you have, worked so hard for, and I think I gave you guys a story about, I've had clients that have rolled up on me and asked me to do illegal things for them, you know. And so if you are in a situation here where you decide to, you know, let it flow and take a risk and enjoy the exhilaration and the excitement of doing something that's wrong and getting away with it and all that whole thing, you cannot be mad when the whole thing comes crashing down. So like I said, and I remember, what was her name? I think it was Fannie Williams or Fannie Willis. She's another example of, and there's thousands of other ones, but this is even more recent, you know, where, and we know about what happened at the Coldplay concert, you know, how the president or the CEO was dating the head of HR, and they both ended up losing their jobs. You know, how they lost it, whether it was forced firing or they took a package and got out. Either way, they also messed up the package as well. So this happens with everybody. But I remember recently with Fannie Willis or Williams, you know, she was involved in the Donald Trump case, and they found out that she was entertaining one of the contract attorneys that were on her team. And so that was probably part of the reason why Donald Trump in the end, you know, was able to not be pinned down under those allegations because of her own misconduct that she was having, you know. And so that put everything that she had did and done under scrutiny. And I think even now she's still going through legal issues. They're trying to disbar her and all that. And so in the end, love is love, but it is not worth it in any kind of way for anybody out here to decide to date folks at work. And I remember recently, I was just talking to a random individual, and they were talking about how, hey, I was just part of this conversation. They were like, hey, you know, a place I'm aware of and where these people work at, there is a person that's a female that is really digging this one guy that works there. And he's in a professional capacity, and she's always talking about how it's wonderful that, you know, you know, how she likes him a lot and she just wished he would make a move. But the question was, well, why isn't this guy making a move on her? And I'm like, well, this guy is in a profession where he's held to a higher standard and he's not willing to put his career on the line. So that's why, whether he feels wonderful about her or not, it doesn't make a difference. He's dealing with professional judgment and making sure that he doesn't put everything that he has worked so hard for on the line. You can't get mad at him about that at all. You know, so it just comes down to that. So these are all critical examples of why you have to be careful. And I'll tell you, and once upon a time in my life, I actually dated somebody that I work with. And I ended up self-terminating myself because it was going to get to the point where this wasn't a subordinate or anything like that at all, but probably somebody at an equivalent level. And I didn't want things to turn around and be found out and anything ever happen, you know, and I ended up getting called in and have to talk and discuss, you know, things over with HR. So I ended up ending the relationship gracefully. And then I also at the same time was looking for another job and I ended up quitting and I went on and moved on to something else. So, you know, I'm not immune from these type of things, but in the end, you know, I realized that I was putting myself, you know, under and risking my career that I was trying to build on something that I probably shouldn't have been doing in the first place. So so the lesson to be learned here on the life side, as well as, you know, the business side. And if you're a business owner and, you know, you run your own business, you got a client that is one of your favorites, you got to be careful, you know, even crossing the line there. You know, so they always say, don't dip your pen in company ink. And these are all like multiple examples of why you really should never, ever do those kind of things. So all I want to say here is be careful, guys, out here on these streets. You know, if you're going to rent somebody a property, go out of your way to make sure that you're renting to the best person that you can. If you're going to use a service, don't try to sidewind it, because in the end, those protections exist. And when Airbnb found out about it, when she tried to approach them, they said, hey, she is no longer this is not on our platform, so you got to deal with it yourself. And when it comes to dating individuals that you might work with, you got to be absolutely careful as well to make sure that you don't get caught up. And you got to keep your eye on the package and always know the count, and then don't do anything at all in the world ever to jeopardize it. So, you know, take these lessons that these guys have learned the hard way and try to learn from them. There's only a few combinations of how things come up in life, and just be cautious and be aware and realize that none of these things are worth you losing your career over. So don't do it. And if you're in an environment where everybody kind of dates everybody and all that kind of stuff, you know, still maintain, you know, objectivity. And if it comes down to where you actually do find somebody and you think that they are the one, you know, I think the best situation, because, you know, in the end, love is love and you never know. But if you do find somebody that you think is magnificent and spectacular at work, you're going to have a serious conversation with them. You're probably going to have to also talk to HR or the ownership and let them know what's going on. But just be aware that if it doesn't work out, one of you guys, if not both of you guys, are probably going to have to go. And if you've worked hard for that career and you are a spotlight and you are doing things that a lot of other people can't do, you know, you don't want to ever have your personal integrity, you know, jeopardized, all because you decided to cross the line and date somebody at work. And if you can always compound these things when you mix in that somebody is married they're in a long-term relationship with somebody else, you know, you're going to definitely make things even harder on yourself. So just like I said, avoid these situations at all costs if you can, and in the end, you'll be okay. So that's it, guys. I don't have anything else to talk about, you know. So my heart goes out to, you know, Coach Moore, as well as the wife and the other girl that was involved. I'm not even going to say any of their names at all. You know, I hope that in the end, you know, they're able to move on from this and not have to, you know, suffer long in their life about this. Doesn't become a spot in their life that they can't recover from. And at some point, I'll tell you what, if Coach Moore, he will bounce back. America loves a good bounce back story. You know, so one day he may bounce back from all this and recover, and he may have to go down to JUCO and start all over again. You know, but I hope that he's able to find his way, and this is an important life lesson that he can pass on to his players and people that are around him, and realize that you can't mess up the package, and you got to always keep track of the count when it's all said and done. So that's it, guys. I don't have anything else to talk about today. I just got to try to see if I can get across this street here, and let's see if I can do it. So let me switch the camera around real quick for you guys. But I am done talking for sure. So this is the VCU campus over here. Very cool. And they just recently put this brand new sidewalk in here. And I think I can ride up on it, but I should have popped up on it, but I didn't. They went ahead and repaved the road here also as well, and kind of feathered it in with everything else that they got going on. So let me just go up here real fast. And actually, you guys can take a look right there. So that's the new track that they have going on. And I'll go down here a little bit further and let you guys see, because I think you guys kind of saw on the other side a little bit when I was riding. But they had everything covered up out here with plastic. So the actual natural grass, you know, it died or went to sleep, and it'll have to be revived again, probably when the temperature gets nice and they get some fertilizer on it. But you can kind of see over here what they have going on. So it's wonderful. Let me see if I can turn this. I don't think I can. But my battery's about ready to die on my unit. I learned a valuable lesson today. I just got to make sure that when I get home, I turn around and charge this bad boy up. So, all right. Cool. All right, guys. Take care, and always thank you for hanging in there with me through these rambles. Hopefully you guys have been able to learn something here that you could or relearn or re-remember something that you already know. That way, when these situations come up, you can think twice and utilize the knowledge of the folks that have come before you, that are alive and that may not be alive, and learn from the lessons, because in the end, most of the times, things will oftentimes turn out to be the same. So, all right, guys, peace. We're out of here. All right, guys, 5,000. I am sideways to the next light. How you doing? All right, guys, peace. In my life, shit. Okay, my brother fell. This is black ice. Okay. All right, I'm okay. All systems check. All right, I'm good. So let me just penguin it.